We have a couple of presenters today. We've got Evan Wolstencroft, who's a program manager at the Texas Rural Funders, and Colin McDonald, who's a senior policy analyst at the Texas Water Foundation. So I hope you're enjoying the conference so far. I realize we just kind of got off to a start, and certainly my presentation was a little rocky in terms of getting off to a start, but we managed to get through that. I know how important it is for Texans to understand our challenges and opportunities that face the state, especially in terms of infrastructure. So I'm pleased to introduce Evan and Colin, who have done a lot of work in areas related to water, Wi-Fi, and the workforce. Evan is, I mentioned earlier, program manager with the Texas Rural Funders. He's a great partner for TDC, and he has worked for over a decade in philanthropy and nonprofits. Prior to joining the TRF, he was the Deputy Director of Development for Educate Texas at Communities Foundation of Texas. He's worked with mission-driven organizations, large and small, focusing on community grant making, public and higher education, healthcare access, homelessness, refugee settlement, workforce development, and getting the count out for the 2020 census. So he's been a pretty busy guy. He holds a bachelor's degree from Stonehill College and a master's degree from the LBJ School of Public Affairs at UT Austin. After living all around the U.S., Evan is proud to call Texas his adopted home. Joining him to co-present in this session is Colin McDonald. He's a senior policy analyst at the Texas Water Foundation. Colin previously worked for the Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts on endangered species issues, coordinating state-funded research with stakeholder needs. Prior to that, he was a newspaper reporter focusing on environment and water issues, especially the Rio Grande and Edwards Aquifer. Colin holds a bachelor's degree in environmental journalism from Western Washington University. We're grateful to have Evan and Colin here today, so please welcome them.
Thanks, Dr. Potter. Hello, everyone. We're going to get started. As we mentioned, the title of our presentation today is Water, Wi-Fi, and the Workforce. So we're going to focus on the infrastructure challenge and opportunity facing Texas with critical infrastructure needs. But first, a little bit about us. If you're not familiar with our organizations, I'm here on behalf of Texas Rural Funders. We are a philanthropy-serving organization. We are not a funder ourselves. We are a collection of funders, some of whom you may know, some of whom you may already love. We're a coalition of 48 rural-serving philanthropies working throughout the state to strengthen rural Texas, specifically by mobilizing the unique power of philanthropy. And as Dr. Potter mentioned, I am joined by my colleague Colin from the Texas Water Foundation.
Hello, Texas Water Foundation, nonprofit, nonpartisan. We work to help move Texas towards a more secure water future. We do this. We have the Water Caucus down in the Capitol right now. It's about half of the House, about half of the members of the House, about a third of the members of the Senate. Teach them about water. Just the facts, ma'am, kind of a setup. The idea being that if they understand water, it's much easier to make laws about it. We also do statewide water campaign, Texas Runs on Water. We do symposiums and town halls across the state to work on regional issues and things like this.
Yes, and from the rural funders side of the house, like I mentioned, we're a philanthropy-serving organization. We're a membership of funders, but we also have a community-facing aspect where we provide information and tools to rural communities to help uplift their work and help extend their impact throughout the state.
And so I guess I jumped a little bit. The biggest service that we provide is that if you have any questions about water, if we can't answer it, and it is answerable, we will know the person who can answer it. And so please, our contact information is at the end of this, but from PFAS to groundwater futures, that's all we do day in and day out. So please feel free to reach out anytime.
In terms of what we're going to talk about, we're going to start off with why this topic generally matters. What is our population's need around water and broadband infrastructure? We're going to move into a report that we commissioned in partnership with Jobs for the Future. You have some handouts on your tables. Looking at research that we commissioned and a little bit about what the data is telling us in terms of our infrastructure needs. If you'd like to read the full report, last page has a QR code. Pull it up. Feel free to give it a read. From there, we're actually going to move into how we can take this data and bring it into action across the state, specifically using some inspiring stories that we have seen from partners throughout Texas. And of course, we will reserve some time at the end to take questions from y'all. The Demographic Center team has these slides. They will be sent out afterward. This is being recorded, and so fear not. Take notes, don't take notes. The information will get to you. So starting off, why does this even matter? Why are we talking about this? We like to think of water and broadband as invisible infrastructure, not in the sense that you can't see it, but you don't necessarily notice it until something has gone wrong or it is not available. Texas needs water to live and broadband to thrive.
All right, so pretty basic. Think through your morning. If you didn't have water, you probably wouldn't be here. If you didn't have Wi-Fi, it would have been a lot more awkward to get here. But also think of anything the feds were talking about, from the silicon plant chips to housing construction. Those are all very water-intensive projects. Right now, I'm doing a lot of work in the Valley. There's major water concerns there. They've had to stop issuing building permits. If you're a small town, you can't issue building permits. That's pretty scary. And that's all directly tied back to water availability and reliability.
We can't skimp on these resources, and I think if there's a theme from today's presentation that we'd like y'all to walk away with, it's we need to take care of the folks who help take care of us. And that means training the workforce we need, connecting students in school, in programs, to opportunities in the infrastructure workforce that can ensure that this water and broadband infrastructure continues to function, that we can actually build it where we need it. Another thing that we're going to be tackling is what sort of moves partners to tackle this in terms of how do we make this happen in practice. What motivates partners? Good data to inform action and some good intel on where we can find resources and funding to make it happen. So we're going to start with the money. Everyone's favorite subject. Where does the money come from? In 2023, Texas voters approved $1 billion in state revenue to help support water infrastructure, $1.5 billion to support new broadband infrastructure. That is complementing money from the bipartisan infrastructure law, investments from the federal level that could still come to Texas, as well as pending legislation right now in the Texas legislature to further support the expansion of water infrastructure. The major upshot, there are major public investments coming to Texas to help upgrade and continue building out long overdue infrastructure needs. Something that we've realized, as this has all been coming down to Texas over the past few years, though, is we may have the money to build this, but who's going to build the thing when the money finally arrives? Yeah,
because infrastructure is very fun and exciting to implement, but Austin's a perfect example of it. When you're trying to do a massive expansion of I-35, a massive expansion of your airport, and build a light rail all at the same time, while you're competing with all the construction that's coming out of San Antonio, we're looking at, I believe it's more than 1,000 jobs. I can't believe it. It's 10,000 jobs a year for the next 10 years plus. So if you know how to operate a bulldozer or a backhoe, or you know anything about rebar and cement, you are in demand, and there are way more jobs than there's supply for that. That's a similar situation that we're seeing with broadband and water.
So let's tie this back to why we're here at the Demographic Conference, and not just because we love Monica, Dr. Potter, and team. So capital infrastructure planning is all about demographic data. It gives us an insight through the models we can build, the projections that we can make about what our infrastructure needs are. And that in turn opens the door to a glimpse of what our workforce needs will be to help achieve those goals. But when we think about demographic data, what exactly is it telling us about infrastructure, Colin?
So it's where people live, where they're moving. It's all the information that we just got this morning. And the challenge of it is that, in the next slide I'm really excited to show you, but it does tell you the story of specifically broadband and water infrastructure. I think you should explain why this man is holding up a picture of a Dalmatian.
Some of you may be familiar with Lonnie Hunt out in Deep East Texas. He's the executive director of the Deep East Texas Council of Governments, formerly a county judge. This is him at our Rural Funders Broadband Summit a few years ago, back in 2022. Brought everyone to College Station for a day to talk about our state's broadband needs. And what Lonnie likes to do is he likes to hold up a piece of paper that looks like Dalmatian spots, polka dots. It's very fashionable, but it gets the general idea across of, in many parts of Texas, you can look at a map and you can see where the holes in high-speed internet coverage are. And it looks like animal print.
Because there isn't coverage there. And if you want to look at for the water sector, well, let's get to my favorite slide.
We're going to go to our favorite slide.
Here it is. I love this slide. Why? Because it's demographic data. That's why we're here. But it's also, it is absolutely, I can tell you the story, I can tell you the state of water off of this map. You'll hear a lot of information, right? Texas is growing really fast. That is true, but it's not accurate. What the reality is that there are a few counties, there's a handful that are growing very fast and the ones around them. And then the majority of the state is either stagnant or declining. And this makes for water very difficult. All these purple dots, this is the same chart that you saw earlier today with a slightly different color scheme, but they have all exceeded the local supply of water, which means all the new water they need to keep their growth going has to come from somewhere else, which means it's more expensive. Those rural areas, which are declining in population, all have aging infrastructure. And it's very difficult, one, it's very difficult to pay for aging infrastructure if you have just period, but two, if you have a declining population, so you're trying to maintain a system that's it was built and designed to serve a bigger population than you need, it's a double whammy on your returns. And then when you're in those rural areas, those bigger areas, if you're anywhere near them, we're talking 100 or 200 miles, you're first on the list for that water to go to the cities. So now the water that you might be able to access is more expensive because you have to compete with the Dallases and the Austins and the Houstons for that water. Same deal. Now there is some advantage in the cities have that they have more people so that you can spread the cost out, the cost per service. But where it really hits you is in broadband.
So we're going to look at the other colors on this map. Colin just walked us through where the major growth corridors are in Texas based on what we can see here in purple, in blue, and green. It's a hub and spoke. We have our large population urban centers that are growing out to the surrounding collar counties, formerly rural, and that is creating a need to build new infrastructure to serve those new communities. For those of you that remember Dr. Potter's slide with Anna and Salina, those are a bit of a drive from here, but that is where the future population of DFW is growing into. We can look at the orange and the red here, and folks, that's rural Texas. The Texas Comptroller has estimated that there are 7 million residents in our state that still do not have access to high-speed internet. 80% of them, an estimate from the Benton Institute for Broadband and Society, live in rural areas. And so when we think about what demographic data can tell us about our infrastructure, it's this geography piece. It's where our population is, where it's concentrating, where it is disconcentrating, if that's a word, but also about density. Where do we have economies of scale to spread the cost of building it in a high-cost area like rural, where you're burrowing through rocks, trimming trees? This is a challenge before us, and it takes skilled human talent to build the new infrastructure we need in all the places where we need it. And so now we get to what we actually researched, what we commissioned alongside Jobs for the Future. So thinking about why we got into this, we see these trends happening across the state for water, for broadband in rural and urban, and we saw a need to find out more data in terms of what is the human capital we require to solve this.
Right, because the reality is Austin's lost water. I'm going to speak about Austin because I live there and I know it. We've lost water twice in the last 5 years. Both causes were there was a winter storm, the other one there was a big flood. But the actual reason the city lost water service was because of a training issue and a gap in employment. If the next time someone in this room loses water, it's most likely going to be either because of an employment issue or directly related to an employment issue, and that there wasn't enough staff to do the repairs, there wasn't sophisticated staff enough to have the ability to put in the preventive maintenance program for it. But it is, when we did a survey before this one about all the water utilities in the state, the number one concern they all had was employment, both retaining the employees they do have, and attracting the next generation of employees.
On the broadband side of the house, especially in rural areas, we often see that talent is imported from other parts of the state or even out of state. So if you're living in big country, West Central Texas, if you're living in the Panhandle, the folks who are coming to lay your fiber cable aren't necessarily coming from down the street. They may be coming from Dallas. They may be coming from neighboring states. And so when local construction or road maintenance cuts your fiber optic cable line, you may be waiting for folks to help respond and restore service to your area. And so this has led to the commissioning of this report, Creating Infrastructure Pathways in Texas, Water and Broadband, really focused on getting high-quality data and insights, not only just to our state agency partners, but also to community leaders, to data analysts, to nonprofits and philanthropy, not just to sort of hit home this message that I think that we've already communicated, that we need a workforce to build and maintain this infrastructure. But the central insight here for us is we have the tools in Texas to do that already. We just have to mobilize them. So in terms of what the report accomplished, how it's structured, the scope of research with Jobs for the Future, it's a very well-respected national leader in workforce development research and analysis. We worked with them to understand what our workforce data is in terms of what it tells us for our needs in water and broadband, as well as what those tools are available, help create an inventory of what we have in Texas to help solve them. The ultimate goal that the report achieves is that it highlights the gaps in our current ecosystem and how we can fill them. The methodology that we used in analyzing the workforce data for this report is drawing from the national data set from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, but also overlaying that with stakeholder interviews of water and broadband leaders here in Texas, crosswalking that with real-time labor market data from job boards, also looking at say for example, the average posting duration so that we're getting a sense of how long are these jobs laying unfilled. That helped us create a list of target occupations in terms of what we know that we need to fill to meet our water and broadband needs.
Right, and so the trick, especially with water on these jobs, is that, and the beautiful part about that wonderful data, unfortunately, it's looking backwards. It's the only way it can look. With water right now, especially when I showed my favorite slide, all those cities are now having to deal with legacy pollution. They're having to deal with much more complicated water systems. So the employees that they currently have are fantastic, but they also need a whole new set of employees to deal with these new challenges they've never had to deal with before. And so the water sector itself is undergoing this change where they used to be able to deal with all of these jobs internally. Water utilities were pretty independent. Now it's much more difficult because now they need people with specialty in virtual reality. They need specialty with complicated computer systems for running systems remotely, which they need broadband for. But they all need more education, not only to get into the system, but also while they're currently running their system. All water utilities are on this pretty steep learning curve right now.
And so when we look at these needed occupations for water and broadband, what we're seeing is that it's not just that we can go out and hire people off the street for them. They need to have specific educational requirements, usually in almost all cases, some kind of education after high school on the broadband side of the house. That usually also includes on-the-job training with the employer. There is not a statewide broadband curriculum for jobs, and so there needs to be some sort of work-based learning. And so looking at the jobs that we need to fill, we know that there needs to be some sort of pathway to get people to the education they need to qualify for these jobs and then get hired. But why don't we have more workers in these areas, Colin?
Primary reason, number one, hands down, they don't get paid. And it is absolutely a reflection of the investment in water. If you can imagine, most of these utilities they're either publicly owned or they're privately owned. If you're publicly owned, then the rates have to be set and approved by some sort of body. And that is it is the worst political situation to be in, because you have to say, hey, I'm going to increase your rates. Every month you're going to see an increase in your bill for a benefit that you may or may not see for 10 to 15 years. And even when you do see it, what you're going to see is a pipe underground not leaking. Elect me again. Or I could just kick that can down the road. Almost every community across Texas has been kicking the can down the road since at least the 1970s, when was the last time we got a big burst of federal funding. So as a result, water utility jobs are at the low market. I can earn more money running a Buc-ee's car wash than I can running a water utility. I can run the Buc-ee's car wash. If it stops working, there might be 1 or 2 people that are mad at me because their Corvette didn't get cleaned. If I'm running a water utility, I have to run it 24/7, and if I shut it and if I mess up, every hospital in the region is very, very upset with me, and I will lose my job. And that will never happen at Buc-ee's. And then on top of that, so these low wages, low recruitment, we have a massive pileup. We're going to lose 30 to 50% of our water workforce in at least the next decade. They all go with their knowledge. So that you know, every water source in Texas is unique. Every water plant, every sewage treatment plant is unique. They're on that massive amount of knowledge that's leaving. It is somewhat transferable, but it's so nice to be able to learn from your predecessors of how this particular plant runs. Imagine like your old car. It's like, oh, you just got to turn the key like that. That's how all our plants run. And so that is why we're having this focus on water workforce.
For broadband workforce, there's a similar financial component at play here. And so, like I mentioned before, those types of workers have to be brought into the communities where they need to actually build out new broadband lines. Why? Well, that is because where you have to bring them in, those communities are always by definition difficult to serve. There is a lot of costs for construction, for line laying, for repair in an area where you may have to cut down trees, where you may have to get folks out to spots that are just difficult to reach by their nature. And so that means that we have a reliance on bringing in folks from outside the region, but at the same time, these are jobs that could be supporting families already in the community. And so we're seeing a need to train more folks in both of these industries. However, we're not necessarily seeing more training programs. One of the big reasons that we see in the report as to why we're not training more folks in these infrastructure pathways is because, one, a lack of career awareness. These don't necessarily follow traditional patterns of job growth. They often cut across multiple industries. They may not always be posted on traditional sites where people find jobs, like a job board. Also, we see a need for expanded training.
Yeah, my point earlier, I'm a little out of order, I apologize, but as we talked about earlier, the job that even if you come from a long family, and we have many families in Texas that have always worked in water utilities, the job your grandfather had or your father had is not the job that you're going to have. How water plants need to be run, whatever the EPA is going to come out, they are constantly changing what the standards are. Now that we can reliably test to parts per trillion, that means there's a lot more stuff we need to be aware of and what the health impacts of that are. That's a much different. I've spent time with water utilities in East Texas. When they started, it was a pump and a well, and that was it. And the collection system was literally a box on someone's porch, and the maintenance truck was a pickup with a couple tools and wrenches in the back. Now you need 2 laptops to manage the pump on your system and the generator. You need a collection system that is all digital, and you have to deal with more regulations than just making sure there's not a dead animal in your well. That was the old system, and the system worked great. And you could run a system with 500 connections. Now you need to have at least 1,000 connections to be anywhere close to solvent to have that critical mass to pay for your costs.
And in terms of broadband, like I mentioned before, there isn't a standardized training curriculum. And so when we're training folks in broadband jobs to repair telecommunications line, to build cellular and radio, it's going to be based off of what that specific employer uses. And so that's not necessarily education that you can carry from job to job to job. And so that creates a structural barrier to training folks in broadband careers where really the solution is sort of a shared curriculum at a higher level, like a state level. So what does this tell us in terms of how to act on some of these insights, in terms of the target occupations that we have, the reasons why we're not training more of these workers, and why we just need more? So first off, for those of you in education and workforce world, you may be familiar with the term education workforce pathways, education and career pathways, just all the different ways that we strategically align our K-12 education system to higher education experiences that actually get folks into jobs that employers need to hire for with the skills they need to do the job. When done right, that can help folks seamlessly transition from school into family-sustaining jobs. And I know the slide here says high school. It's not just folks who are currently in our school systems. That includes opportunity youth who are not currently in school and not currently working. That includes pathways for adult learners. It's really sort of focusing on what is the road that we have to pave together with partners to get folks into the job. This is one example, taking that high schooler example. In high school, you can have a career exploration experience. You know, work with your counselor, go to a career fair, sort of understand what does it mean to work in the water sector? What does it mean to work in the broadband sector? Based on your interest, you may be able to take career and technical education classes, CTE, where you are learning specific content and skills for those jobs. In many Texas high schools, that could even be part of a dual credit program. While you are in high school, you are earning college credit in that field at a local community college so that you graduate with an associate or with some college credit, so that you are eventually building this portfolio of stackable degrees and credentials. Education that builds on itself as you continue to accrue it, so that when you have an experience with an employer where you are learning on site, you know what you're doing. You may be even able to earn and learn, like an apprenticeship, where you can be paid while learning on the job, working for an employer who can give you a full-time permanent position at the end of that education. The ultimate destination of a pathway being, we have a trained workforce for the industry that we just built this pathway with. Simple, no? Perhaps not. It takes a lot of stakeholder coordination, and it's not just the job of the public and higher education systems in this state. It also takes employers working with workforce boards, working with state agencies and policymakers and other community leaders like nonprofits and philanthropy to really make this work. And so there is good news. Texas is actually pretty good at this. We are a national leader in pathways development. It's something we've been doing for 20 plus years. We have tools at the state level with our 3 main education workforce agencies to help this along at different parts of the process. There is no new legislative action needed right now to do this. These tools exist. The not great news is that we aren't necessarily using them, even though that we know how to do it, specifically for water and broadband. And that is specifically kind of a data conversation. So when we think about what are we building a pathway for, what career is it leading into? It is leading into a list of target occupations. Basically, the list of jobs we know are needed. We need to fill these. How are you defining need? Most typically, need is going to be defined with specific criteria where, okay, we know this job is high demand. Typically, it's going to see at least 17% growth year over year. That is what we're going to define as high demand in this state. It's going to be high wage. If you get this career, your earning potential is going to be, I don't know if it's a median or a starting, but $35,000 a year. Broadband and water jobs don't necessarily meet those thresholds. Some of them do, like civil engineers. Some of them do not. However, that does not mean that they're not critical. These data thresholds do not assess the criticality of the job at hand. There may only be 2 water jobs or a handful of broadband jobs in your small county. Do you want to be the county that does not have a person to fix the water system when you get the boil water notice? No. We still need to fill these and find a way to do it. Unfortunately, this sort of problem of data criteria and methodology also leads to a funding issue. Funding follows target occupations, and so if it's not on the list, it's going to be really hard to unlock new funding resources to support the development of a pathway. Anything to add?
Well, yeah, to think about it historically, Texas is really good at producing thousands of pipe fitters, right? We have massive oil refinery complexes. They say, hey, we're getting new oil from wherever. This is what we're building a whole refinery for it. We need 1,000 of them. We need 2,000 of them. This is how much they're going to pay. Boom. We have the training facility for that. We need 2 to 3 people per regional area sometime over the next 20 to 50 years. Much more difficult to fill. But like we said, if we don't have those jobs, it is the invisible infrastructure that we have to have for anything to happen in these communities. So they have a very outsized impact, even though they're not treated as such.
And so we can think about, in terms of water and broadband, target occupations as the critical jobs needed to sustain the communities that exist now where they are. You shouldn't have to move away from home because you can't turn on the tap or because you can't access high-speed internet. And so one of the ways that we leverage this report is in reframing the wisdom on water and broadband jobs.
Right. So we don't want to say we can't compete with the pipe fitters, but we can compete with, if you don't have water, you don't have an economy. This is a corner block of your community, and that's the pitch, is that without these jobs, without these people, nothing else happens.
Example of DFW?
Okay, so quickly went on Indeed, drew a 100-mile radius around Dallas. More than any utility more than half the utilities within 100 miles of where we're standing right now all need people of at least the Class D. That's just the entry-level position. And those positions have been open for months. And a lot of them just have a standing opening. Like, hey, come on down. We'll try you out. So if anybody here just graduated and really wants to stay wherever they want to stay, I can probably find you, and that, I know a guy service, I can find you a job at your local utility. I guarantee you, there's no utility in the state that is not trying to hire somebody right now. And if you can do anything from talk to someone on the phone to drive a backhoe, if you can drive a backhoe, I can definitely find you a job. Or if you have, students graduating, doesn't know what they want to do, want to take a gap year, water utility, great service, great place to, find yourself.
So the water authorities within 100 miles of DFW all may have Class D water license openings to treat and operate new systems and current plants. That's only about like 1 or 2 openings in a county, yes? Or per authority?
My little Excel spreadsheet that I made up it's a total of 30 people, 30 positions.
But still critical to sustaining the life and vitality of that community. For broadband, another sort of challenge with using traditional historical labor market data to make projections is that it is backward looking. It's taking what we already know and trying to make inferences and forward-facing projections that don't always anticipate changes in workforce needs. And so we mentioned infrastructure funding coming to Texas. Texas got the largest federal award of broadband infrastructure money of all 50 states. That isn't necessarily something that we could have predicted 10 years ago. And so there is going to be a bump and a need to fill those types of jobs that we weren't necessarily planning for, that we can start planning for now. So, some opportunities for action. The report also highlights partners, practitioners, folks in the field who are doing neat things to advance different parts of the pathway. and developing new training programs. And the neat thing, too, is it doesn't depend on one partner doing it all by themselves. We can push a little bit on the lever, each one of us, and it still moves the lever forward in the direction that we need to. And so some examples from the report.
Yeah, the good old-fashioned of necessity being the mother of invention. Water utilities cannot fail, so they are figuring it out. And one of the big things we got to with this report was go around and say, like, what's working? One of the programs that's working, the Texas American Waterworks Association started the SETH program, Science, Engineering, Technology, and Health. And basically what they do is they partner with a independent school district, and they give them, American Waterworks Association is what helps set the standards for water quality. So they have so they work with TCEQ. They came up with training videos that are approved by TCEQ that qualify for the classes to get your Class D. You can take those in high school, and then you can when you're done with that program, you have met the requirements to take the test to get your Class D, and you can walk. Ideally, that's the independent school district has already partnered with a local utility. That's what you see here on these kids taking it. This is a tour of a sewage treatment plant. So they know, back to the lovely career path that we had earlier, you can walk out, basically you could walk from your graduation platform into the job. And they'd be very happy to have you.
And Texas American Waterworks Association is currently partnering with 5 school districts throughout the state on this, looking potentially to expand it to more. So let us know if you have an interest in water in your local area. Shiny new thing happening down back in our neck of the woods, the Austin Infrastructure Academy. Looking at building a training hub to train students in critical infrastructure careers while also providing wraparound supports like childcare, like job placement, like targeted recruitment of students to attend the academy. It is primarily led by Workforce Solutions Capital Area, but in partnership with the city and county government, in partnership with Austin Community College as an education partner. Austin Community College went and used its bond authority to help create a physical facility to host the academy, so that thanks to, in terms of projections, Mayor Watson shared this last week, without the Austin Infrastructure Academy, Austin is projected to have a 4,000 person deficit in its infrastructure workforce that the academy is now projected to fill per year. And then zooming across the state to our friends in El Paso.
Right, where if you ever have a water issue, go to El Paso, because they were most likely dealing with it decades before you were. 8 inches of rain a year. They also have there's this little town across the water called across the river, which doesn't really exist anymore. Juarez, same deal. And then on top of that, they have the oil patch. If you're that high school kid in Juarez or in El Paso, and you can get a commercial driver's license, you can go earn 6 figures in the oil patch. It will be dangerous work. It will be incredibly difficult work. You will not be anywhere close to home, but you will get money. El Paso Water cannot compete with that. So they came up with this S4 program. They said, okay, well, what can we offer? We can offer stability. We can offer you an opportunity to stay near your home, and we will treat you with respect. We will meet you where you are and find the services that you need so that you can come. If that's childcare, absolutely. If you want to work on a college degree while you're here, absolutely. If you need an adjustment in your schedule to, so that you can meet your childcare needs or elder care needs, we want to work with you. We want to be a partner with you for a long time. By the way, we'll pay you 1/3 of what you could earn in the oil patch. But we're here for you. And when the oil prices drop, which we just saw, and they start firing people out in the oil patch, or they get, new technology comes around, the system's much more efficient, you will still have a job. And the 2 really clever things they did with this is, 1, they didn't run it through their HR program, because the HR program is actually not designed to be an advocate for the employee. They ran it through their employee system. And the other thing is that they offered this wraparound services for all employees. So they're using it to recruit PhDs, which have the exact same scenario. They could earn way more money working any place else. But if they work at El Paso Water and they can, they also have this, they have the wraparound services, and the one thing they sell is like, you're helping your community.
So looking outside the report too, just in talking to our partners in the field about the report, what it means, how we can leverage it. We're seeing ways that we can use this data to inform new action. Texarkana College has a state-of-the-art HVAC program, lovely facility. After talking about the report with them, they're interested in potentially using that facility to also train broadband careers. The sort of insight being, we can do this, we just need to find and purchase a curriculum. That is a tangible barrier and a real barrier that we can overcome in a fairly actionable way. Zooming up to the Panhandle, The Range is an industry-led organization focused on regional economic development, really sort of thinking about how can employers help lead the conversation on the workforce that we need to develop for the 26 counties of the Panhandle, where the main industries are meat and dairy. 85% of our beef, 10% of our dairy comes from the Panhandle. And there are supporting industries that make all of that possible. That is not possible without precision agriculture powered by high-speed internet. That's not possible without water infrastructure. And so they took the report, looked at where their workforce academy plan to develop new talent aligns with the recommendations from the report, where they can integrate new water and broadband technical pathways into their training and use some of the insights from the report, like the coming retirement of our water infrastructure workforce, as a way to kick off the conversation with local water authorities. So that was a lot of information. We can sort of boil this down to what I think is a fairly simple recipe. I think it's important also to know that these are locally led solutions. The examples that we gave aren't necessarily cookie cutter. They may work in El Paso, they may work in the Panhandle. What's important is, what are sort of the key ingredients that we need to grow something that serves the unique, specific needs of the community where we live? And it really is sort of uniting these three pieces: an education partner. Where is the source of students, and where is the place where we can talk to students and help them learn? Who has workforce expertise in terms of the knowledge that we know needs to be in these jobs, and who can train these students at this place? And of course, what's the curriculum? What are we training them on? Is it recognized? Is it something that they can keep building on over time? And we can take this report and sort of look at different regions of the state where we can sort of build this virtuous circle of workforce education curriculum to meet these infrastructure needs. Of course, that takes some resources, and so we want to leave you with just a little bit of some fun information on how we can help unlock more resources for this work. Sometimes people will come and talk to me and my executive director, Kelty Garby, when we talk about workforce development, and they say, we don't have a workforce board. I promise, everyone does. The state is divided into 28 workforce regions, and the neat thing, too, is that your local workforce board creates the plan that helps guide where dollars go to for workforce development. They submit it every year. It is on the Workforce Commission website if you want to go and look up and find out if your workforce board is already talking about water and broadband as target occupations, because there is a fun loophole built into state regulation. It's not just high demand, high wage. We can use local knowledge to define our list of target occupations. If we know that we need water workers, if we know that we need broadband workers, our workforce board can help us carry that conversation forward and unlock new funding by integrating it into our local workforce board region's jobs plan. And of course, coming later this year, specific workforce dollars to develop the broadband workforce from our Texas Broadband Development Office. But I know that we have a few minutes left. We would love to open this up to some question and answer with y'all.
All right. Rachel, just thank you. That's a great presentation, both of y'all. Yes. Have some questions right over here.
Howdy, Amber Rayleigh, UT Arlington and Dallas College. So very interested in these items, and I'm curious on two fronts related to two different projects I've been pursuing in those avenues. One around strengthening career and technical education for the 21st Century Act, also known as Perkins 5 legislation, and leveraging the tenets within that, which you kind of referenced a bit in terms of funding and also mechanisms, especially through the comprehensive local needs assessment to implement some of these ideas. So that's one. And then two, curious around leveraging open educational resources, OER, free online textbooks, to create some of that curricula that you mentioned were so desperately needed.
Thank you for raising that. So on the last slide, we mentioned WIOA funding, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which helps bring specific workforce development dollars down to the state level. It's distributed through the Workforce Commission. Perkins 5, which you just mentioned for the audience, is a similar piece of legislation that allocates funding, I believe, specifically for vocational education, correct?
For CTE and both K through 12, it goes all the way to the middle grade, 6th
Mhm.
grade.
Career and technical education. Thank you. That is another way that we can unlock further funding for this. But there are also state programs through TEA, through the Workforce Commission as well. They have a middle skills initiative. There is JET grants. There are rural workforce innovation hubs that they've stood up. And so what we've shared in the presentation isn't the full sum total of the funding world. There are other resources out there from state partners, from philanthropy that can continue to build this out. I also think of from the philanthropic side, Rural Promise in a Box from Greater Texas Foundation, the work being done in rural areas to really sort of create a template that different community colleges in a rural serving region can replicate to meet their specific needs. And the second piece, open curriculum. How can we try and find ways of overcoming that funding barrier to buy new curricula? I think that there are a couple different answers for that. I think of our friends at the Texas Broadband Development Office trying to gather information on what curricula is out there, just get their hands on and try and understand what are industry leaders trying to do already and how can we adapt something at a state level. It may not have the same force as something, say, through TEA, but what can we just sort of provide to the field initially? I think that this coming workforce RFP can help us answer some of that. There are national partners as well that can offer some solutions. I think of the Fiber Broadband Association is developing new training programs. But from the water side.
The water side, it's a little bit tricky. Seth initially made their online their videos online. That was their plan. And then they realized that those darn kids were smart, and they said, if I go for fast forward, I can get my 22 hours in about an hour. And that wasn't the point of the train. The train was you were supposed to watch the whole videos, so now they've very much controlled access to them. But there are lots of partners they're willing to give the videos to anybody for free if they're willing to sit in the room and with the kids to watch, or whoever, to watch the videos. And so there's a lot of little specialized quirks like that. The information is there. The information exists. The curriculum has been developed. How to translate it to whatever the specific end user is, that's the rub.
Hello.
One very quick question, and just nod or one way or the other, but did I hear you say $35,000 a year starting salary? Did I hear you say that number?
I'd have to go back to the report to see if it's specifically starting salary or how they're defining it. But yes, the report outlines that
Okay.
wage criteria is $35,000.
Sure. Okay, that would be part of the problem for the recruitment problem for sure.
Yes.
Do you know of any House bill or Senate bill this time in the state legislature that's trying to push funding your direction or push further education your way, whatever it might be?
Well, I know that our friends down in Austin across the state focused on education of the workforce chip away at this every 2 years. Sometimes more often than that if there's a special session. We can look to college and career readiness incentives through House Bill 3 in 2019. We can look at community college finance reform, House Bill 8 in 2023, as different ways the legislature has tried to push forward specifically more money toward building incentives where community colleges and school districts are developing more of these pathways. I think the challenge is continuing to educate our partners across the state, raise awareness, and sort of share with them strategies to where you can define these types of careers as in need based on your own knowledge of your region. I'm less knowledgeable about what's happening this session in terms of deep detail. I do know that there have been career and technical education bills moving across the floor to help specifically around rural pathways. I believe Collegiate Education has been very interested in seeing that advance. That may be an area to follow up on after the meeting in terms of just a source of information to go look up. Yeah.
And for water, it's a very hot topic right now. Tomorrow in Austin, there will be a debate about SB 7, $2.5 billion one-time shot with the new $1 billion a year dedicated funding, just like our highways, just to water. And the question is, how should that money be allocated? Should the legislators say, oh, 80% needs to go to new water? Or should we, address needs as they come up at, how much flexibility and how much trust do you have in the system? There are a lot of people that are very red in their face right now arguing different sides of that debate.
Question over here.
Yeah, thank you all so much for pointing out workforce boards. I work for Workforce Central North Central Texas, Workforce North Central Texas. We're actually developing our target occupation list right now. I'm in charge of developing that, so I'm definitely going to carry this back to my board, bring attention and awareness to it. And also, I think I've worked for local government all my career, so I think getting buy-in from local governments and workforce boards, having that communication is key, because the funding doesn't come from the state. It's really at the local level where we need more action and more awareness and more dollars allocated to this kind of career pathway. Have y'all worked with workforce boards, or have y'all given presentations to them? What's y'all's interaction been with them?
I think that we're still trying to find more venues to bring this information to, but thank you so much for bringing up the role of local government as a critical partner in the development of these pathways. It's not just workforce boards, although workforce boards are a key critical component of that. It's also looking at who in your region is sort of one of the right local government partners to go to. And in your region, that might be the local council of government as a convener and as a source to push this work forward. It may be the county, it may be a collection of the cities. And so local government is a key partner that can't be left out, but it's also not a homogenous partner. It has several different stakeholders that we can engage alongside our workforce boards. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi there, Sarah. I'm with North Central Texas Council of Governments. My question is more on water and needing those resource scientists. Have you noticed in Houston an increase of salinity due to construction and offshore drilling just really taking up a lot more water than, here in Dallas? It's not really drilling, it's just mainly building houses, building buildings, building the roads. But in Houston, are you seeing a lot more salinity in the water and having to plan for those resources?
Right, so everybody knows that when you flush the toilet here, that's Houston's water supply, right? Okay. Yep, that's Houston's. What? That is Houston's drought contingency plan. That said, it's broader than specifically salinity, but just to total dissolved solids. As more development happens, as there's less riparian corridors, that Trinity River is its main water supply, and so water quality is a constant issue, and that goes back to this increased level of sensitivity that we have. There was a recent study that came out. Persistent chemicals in the environment. It's defined by being lasting more than 60 days. If you put something in. If you flush something down the toilet now, it will be in Houston in less than 60 days. So it doesn't actually matter if it's persistent or not, it's in Houston. Yes, they are massively on a race to figure out how to protect that and what water quality treatment they will need going forward.
Hi, thank you very much. Jeff Dennis, Texas Tech Health Science Center. So I appreciate this. In West Texas, we have a lot of rural, not a lot of water. And I'm curious, based on kind of the theme of population growth, what do you see as the areas, particularly like booming areas, that are kind of, I don't know if the right word, highest pressure points for water scarcity in terms of their water infrastructure is not coming anywhere close to staying up with their population growth? What are those areas, and are they likely to follow, as you mentioned, El Paso is kind of out in front of this because they had to deal with this. Are these the areas that are going to, be more likely to invest in kind of water, whereas, like a lot of parts of DFW seems like water is still pretty plentiful, they may be able to kind of kick it down the road. Who's going to have to get serious about water infrastructure sooner rather than later? Sorry, winding question, but.
No, that's like right to the heart of it. Water planning is just a facade for deciding what your community values are at any particular level. So that's what it comes down to is West Texas is full of them. There are communities that no longer exist that don't have water. Big Spring isn't that big anymore. Fort Stockton is a truck stop. It's a lovely town, but it used to have Fort Stockton used to have a synchronized swimming team.
Comanche Springs.
They were kind of nationally famous for it. Some rice farms went in, the springs went dry, the synchronized swimming team went away. So to answer your question, definitely the most vulnerable communities are the ones that are the smallest and are shrinking. They just don't have the resources for it. Yeah, Dallas there is a lot riding on making sure that Dallas doesn't run out of water. Could Dallas maybe be a little more efficient with its water use per capita? Yeah. There's some really green lawns out here all the time. But it also does get more rain here. So it works out. Dallas pulls the water you get out of your tap here can come from 5 different watersheds. You're drawing water almost all the way literally from Oklahoma. But that's, yeah, it's the small vulnerable communities that don't have a strong economic standing that are absolutely the most vulnerable.
All right. Well, this was a great session. Let's give our speakers and presenters a round of applause. Lots of great ideas, planted some seeds. Looks like we got some target occupations happening here on a list. Let's talk to more workforce boards here in the future. All right, everybody. Well, it is lunchtime. I guess lunch is right out here, and then you can come in here to sit. And our plenary will begin here at 1:15 also.